Hello ladies, I'm Mrs. Sherman. I have a blog for which I will leave the link in the description box. I don't have any comments available on the video channel because I would like you to go over to my blog and participate in what we have over there and see what I'm all about. I'm making these videos for my blog, so this is just a parking place for them. But I want to say right away that I want to be make these into homemaker support in the way that you can listen to them as you get something done. And I have had some delightful emails that tell me a list of all the things they got done and how that it helped them kind of coach them along. And also I wanted to say that if it doesn't suit you, you don't like it here, and you're offended by it all, you know what's so wonderful is that you can go somewhere else. You can leave. If it doesn't please you, you can leave, and the choices are huge. There's just so many more people than there are me. I'm not the only one here, and there might be somebody that's just right for you, or some video that tickles your fancy so much better, and you're welcome to go. And I'm happy for you if you found some place that you like better. And today I would like to, first of all, I'll address the fact that people have said that the video isn't clear. There's a lot of strange shadows on my face. There's a lot of washed out stuff. I'm using still using a computer from the olden days, and that's going to be taken care of when the 8-year-old grandson comes to see me. Because if you want anything fixed technologically, just go to the youngest one in the family, and he's going to fix my phone too. So I'll be company for you while you check your appearance in the mirror, because we talked about appearance comes first when you're in your home life, starting your home life, your life at home as a homemaker. Your appearance should always come first because you're important. You're the first lady of the house, and it helps you to get a few minutes to get your thoughts collected and to get feeling motivated. And when you look in that mirror, have a look at your eyes. Make sure you haven't gotten cynical or hardened, and that you have a bright, optimistic feeling in your face. And I did write an article many years ago on cynicism, so if you want to just type that in, type the word cynical, or cynicism into the search box on my blog, you'll find it. And it talks about the man named Cynic that lived before Christ and what his whole philosophy was. It's the author of all cynicism that goes on today too. It's nothing new, and there's nothing new under the sun, and people that get cynical haven't invented anything new. It's just the same old stuff, and it's just a backwards way of thinking. So fix yourself up. And also I will be addressing maybe 4 things: your clothes, your thinking, your house, and your people, because these things are they just work together. And so that's why I also wanted to show you. I'm wearing a dress. I'll just get up here and see if I can show you what it looks like. I'm wearing a dress that I made out of 100% cotton that comes from Hobby Lobby. I believe it was made out of from a brand called Brother and Sister Fabrics for Hobby Lobby, and I really like it. And what it is, I know my video camera is not showing the colors, but it's a light blue background with roses on it. And the quiet lady that anonymously sent me 6 different colored teacups sent me one that goes with this beautifully. Look at that. They just matches, so I'm happy. I've got a teacup to go with. I have 2 more of these teacups to review. They came in a package of 6. I love the bowl shape. I think that the tea tastes better in it, and the fact that it's a smooth surface that's very shiny, it's not rough. So thank you very much. I'm keeping it, but doesn't it go with it nicely? Also today I'm going to be talking about how your home is your own country. So you have your own country, and in a way, you wave your own flag. I've often wondered if I should make my own flag. I think I would just make one with a rose on it. The peace rose, maybe. And so you should have your own flag and your own constitution, and your own Declaration of Independence from the rest of the world's sarcasm and their cynicism. You should have your own Declaration of Independence and your own Constitution, because this is your own country, and keep all that negative out. So we're also going to deal with figures of speech and sayings. So today is a day for sayings. And every cloud has a silver lining. This is the first one that I thought of because I was taught this when I was really young. It seems rather trite. Who wants to talk about every cloud has a silver lining? But if you're in the middle of winter and your skies are really dark and it just weighs heavily on you, you have to remember, if you were up in an airplane and you got above all those dark clouds, you would see the sun. It is up there. And when you think about that, it makes things seem so much better. But what every cloud has a silver lining means, if you've ever seen a cloud with the sun shining on it and there's a lining in it, and it seems kind of silver, it's rather bright and white. I don't know if you've ever noticed that. That'd be something you could take your children out to see sometime. And when I was little, my mother took us outside and showed us things. She would say, look at the clouds. What do they look like? Oh, that one looks like a mountain. Oh, that one looks like a flower. That one. And we would look at the clouds and imagine what they looked like. I wrote about it in my book, Just Breathing the Air. And I will read that book out loud to you sometime on this YouTube channel, because it's quite an expensive book. It has a lot of colored photos in it, which drove the price up. Plus, it's a personal family memory, and we couldn't keep the price down, so I will read it to you for free. And so the other one is, and that's important, because when you're talking about your thinking, I talked about last time how you need to dress up in the morning because you're the first lady of the right house. You're the first lady of your home. You need to dress up and give it some dignity, so that you don't feel like a drudge, so that others will also treat you a little bit better. Maybe they won't, but at least you will be dressed for it. If you get a good chewing out and somebody is being very rude to you and they're yelling at you, at least you'll be dressed up. So isn't it interesting how when you don't, that's the day everything seems to go wrong. So dress up and be prepared for the best. So the other one is, where there's a will, there's a way. And that kind of goes along with necessity is the mother of invention. Where there's a will, there's a way. And sometime I'll have Mr. S come and talk to us about resourcefulness and how to make something out of something that is maybe going the wrong way, how to change a situation, or how to make the best of a bad situation. He's really good at that. But behold, what I fear the most may come upon me, because the last time he came on me on this video with me, I got all these emails saying, when is he coming back? When are we going to hear more of him? Does he have a channel? So they like him better than they like me. So I don't know. Maybe I'll just leave him alone. We will see. But he has such good things to say. I might let him come for a price. So the other, necessity is the mother of invention. And where there's a will, there's a way. This is so important because it's one of the first things you teach your children. I can't do this. Well, I can't do this and I can't do that. And you say, well, if you want to bad enough, you'll figure out how to do it. And sometimes we, as adults, notice this more when we've become desperate. Let's say we only have a few dollars left in our purse and we have to maybe go and provide a meal for your family. Maybe you're not getting paid for a couple more days and you just have to, you become very resourceful. You start to think of, I'll go to the grocery store with a list and I'll think, I don't need such and such because I probably have the ingredients to make that myself. And I don't really need to buy a loaf of bread. I could make the loaf of bread at home. You become more and more resourceful. And I have often come home with all the money still in my purse because I look at everything and think, I actually have something that would actually suffice for that. And when I talked to you last couple times about vinegar, well, there's my cleaning product. So if I have a cleaning product on my list and my money is precious to me or running a little bit low, I'll say, oh, I'll just use my vinegar, or I'll buy a bottle of vinegar for $1. And so where there's a will, there's a way, and necessity is the mother of invention. Now that was what the Victorians lived on, and that was why there were so many inventions during that era, which I believe might have been, was it 70 years? There were so many things invented in that era. Necessity is the mother of invention. And it was all, they designed things to help them, you know, as they became more independent and people had their own little houses and the factories became more popular to work in than being servants of a household, people invented things that would replace the servants and the maids and the butlers. And it was so interesting because now you could have a vacuum cleaner, and now you could have a sewing machine, you know, you could sew your own clothes, and necessity is the mother of invention. And where there's a will, there's a way. So think about that, because that is part of how your thinking will have to work. And the first thing people will do to discourage you is to get you to think that you can't do it, and to get you to think that you are, well, one of the things I had noticed was when you dress up a little bit more, let's say even you decide to wear a dress to church and you just dressed up a little bit more, somebody will invariably tell you that you giving them the perception that you think you're better than other people, or that you are conceited. That's one of the things they'll use on you, and they'll use that word perception. And I've noticed that word perception has come out quite a bit more in the last few years. Is that, do you realize you've given people the perception? And I was teaching a class one time at home, and some of the ladies were making comments, and it was just, I thought it was an interesting class, and we didn't argue or anything, but one of the young girls took offense and told someone else later that the ladies had given her the perception that they thought they were better than she was, or that they were all right and she was all wrong. Well, here's that word perception, and it's designed to intimidate you and make you apologize and make you think and make you feel guilty. So what you have to do, first of all, I really believe you should never lower your status by groveling and apologizing constantly to people who have accused you of giving them a perception of something. Because I have developed a new saying. So when they use this word perception, well, you give me the perception that this or that. I say perception can be deception. Because we have learned from the olden times that not everything that we perceive is true. Sometimes it's not what you think it is. So perception can be deception. So let's be careful about that one. So I think I've debunked that. The other saying was, what hill do you want to die on? A lady in the ladies' Bible class that's older than me came up with that one. I said, I've never heard that one before. I thought that was so interesting. She had two sayings that she brought. We've been discussing this, figures of speech and sayings, and she said one of them was, what hill do you want to die on? She says that's for dealing with people who like to argue. And in your home, you might get some arguers, and so you've got to choose your battle and decide at what is the most important point for you that you want to give all your time to, that you want to waste your breath on. What hill do you want to die on? And make sure that you ignore the things that you can't handle and ignore the things that are not that important to you. And somebody told me once that if you think it's important enough to argue over, make sure that it's important enough to sign into law. And when you think about that, there's nothing that important. But you do sometimes come across people who just want to argue all the time. And the other saying that this woman had was, some people want to talk just to hear argue just to hear their brain rattle. I had never heard that one before. I think that's really funny. Means just talking just to feel important and just to hear themselves. The other thing is, let sleeping dogs lie. Now we get that one from the Old Testament book of Proverbs, where it talks about how a foolish man will take a dog by the ears. Pick up a dog by the ears. Have you ever seen a sleeping dog lying on the front porch and some kid comes and pulls his ear? Well, he'll screech, he'll bark, and he might even bite. And he'll create all kinds of commotion. So if you see somebody who's minding their own business and this is where you need to train your children from the very beginning. If the other children are minding their own business and they're not causing any trouble, leave them alone. And parents need to learn this too. Sometimes a child will be just content, coloring, playing, quiet, reading a book, and a parent will demand that they come right away and do something else, and the child will, their mind can't adjust very quickly, and they will cry. And if you don't like too much noise in your house, don't bother people who are not bothering you and who seem to be content and happy and aren't doing anything wrong. So I was trying to tell this to a young person one time whose parents had asked me to express this sleeping dogs lie thing. Lie meaning lie down. Don't let sleeping dogs lie. Leave them alone. And I was explaining this to him, and I said it comes from a proverb that a foolish man takes a dog by the ears. No, as a foolish man takes a dog by the ears. And he said, well, are you calling me a dog? He had totally not heard it. And this is the way people think sometimes. Their minds jump to something right away that isn't truth. No, I am saying if you see a dog laying there and he's sleeping and he's not bothering anyone, don't grab him by the ears. And he had never heard this. But I said the dog will yelp and cry and screech and maybe even bite you. So leave people alone in the home if they are not bothering you. And if they're not bothering anybody else and they're not doing anything harmful, leave them alone. Let sleeping dogs lie. So I enjoyed, years ago, someone lent us some videos called Poirot about a Belgian detective, and he had an inspector, an English inspector, that they worked in this, they worked together with police and that sort of thing with solving mysteries. And the inspector said, Poirot, what should we do? Should we contact so-and-so? Should we interview this person? And Poirot very wisely said, no, I don't think we should. Let the sleeping dog tell the lie. Of course, this little Belgian was always getting these English expressions wrong, these English sayings wrong, but I thought that one was really cute. Let the sleepy dog tell the lie. So we use that a lot. Instead of saying let sleeping dogs lie, we say let the sleepy dog tell the lie. So that's just one of our own family speak thing, and hopefully you'll develop that too. So now that I've got one more thing to go to here, and that is your thinking. I think we probably won't get much past the thinking today, because your thinking is what will affect your housework. It will affect your ambition to get things done, to get certain rooms acceptable to you. And you want to also treat your house like it is your castle. One of my favorite scenes in the 1995 series Pride and Prejudice was Darcy walking down the halls of his home holding a candle at night, and walking down these wide halls that even had couches and benches on either side of them because they were that wide, and the big pictures of his ancestors on the walls. And so at night, when I'm shutting everything down and I'm closing the windows and pulling the drapes shut, and I just feel like I'm walking through the halls with a candle and getting everything shut down. So that the vision that you have of your house is not just a place of work, but it's elegant, and you're dressed for it, and you're the queen of the house. So that's part, how your thinking is involved in your work, and how do you develop skills according to your thinking. And now one more thing that I want to tackle right now, and I've only gone 19 minutes, but I'm thinking of making this short today, and that is these people that want to tell you that, do you know that if you don't do a certain thing, or you don't or you keep doing a certain thing, and they'll have these calculations, in 15 years there won't be any more food in the field. And I'm just giving you an example of how ridiculous this is. It's these people that have got it all figured out, that in 15 years your country will be taken over by a bunch of barbarians who will then destroy all the crops and then make it so you can't live in your house, and you'll all be living in tents, and you'll all be living in poverty if you don't get out and get a job and do such and such. And they will have all these things, all these horrible things that are going to come upon you personally on your property in your house. And they get a lot of it from the media too, and they have it all calculated down to the hour and the day when the disaster is going to come upon you. And what they're doing is they'll also say that there won't be any more people left in your family, or they'll say something really really strange. And it's hard to describe this new thinking that's coming along, and especially I think it's coming from the young people, but it could be some of the things they're reading. But what they're leaving out in all these predictions, and they love percentages. They love to leave a percentage of so much percentage of this and percentage of that, and by our calculations, by this particular year, by the year whatever, there won't be anything here. And so what they're leaving out is, first of all, they're leaving out my prayers. Remember Mary, Queen of Scots? Whenever John Knox came to see her, he was a preacher that when he tried to persuade her to do right when he saw her doing wrong. And whenever he left, she said, "I fear the prayers of John Knox more than all the armies of the world." So they've left out my prayers, the prayers of other people around me. They've left out my love, and you cannot put a percentage on anyone's love. They leave out the love you have for your people, your family, your church, and your country. They've left that out, and that's where a lot of your ambition comes from, is your love, and your actions often come from that. And they've left out the Lord. They've left out how God deals with us because of our love and our response to Him and the way we live. And they've left out our prayers, and they've left out the fact that we have a great God. And so you cannot put percentages on that stuff. And so, ladies, if it's bothering you, all these things that you hear or read on the web, you need to go, retrain your mind and learn to laugh at that stuff. Remember the Proverbs 31 woman, she laughs at the time to come. They laughs at the future. These people always are worried about the future. I am not worried about the future right now. I'm wanting to get my laundry done. I'm wanting to get a room cleaned up and repaint the walls. I want to leave it in better shape than when I got into it. And I want to do better today than I did tomorrow. To me, that's my future. I also have the other ambitions, things I want to write, things I want to make, and classes I might want to teach. So they can't put a percentage and a prediction on you. That's part of working on your mind, is to discourage you. And I don't know if you remember Home, Home on the Range. One of the reasons Americans love that song so much, it says, "Where never is heard a discouraging word." Why would someone want to live out on the range and have a ranch? And it's so that they can think for themselves, do for themselves, and not listen to the naysayers. Do you get sick of it sometime, all the naysaying, all the hatred? That's why I tell you, when you come on here and you're listening to me, if it doesn't make you happy, if you're not happy, you are free to leave and you can go somewhere else. There are so many millions of places on the web that you can go. I'm just like that much of the web. It's so tiny, it's just insignificant, and you can go somewhere else, and I'm not a threat to anyone. So just go and be happy. It's not good for you to be so unhappy. It will wear down your organs. It'll affect your blood pressure. It'll affect your heart. It'll affect everything. It'll affect your digestion and elimination. So if you're not happy, you are free to leave, and then you will be happy. Maybe you'll be really, really happy. So I wanted to tell you about the Home on the Range song, and I'll try to include it. It seems sort of pie in the sky, idealistic, but one of the reasons people like to live like that is because no one's bothering them, and that they can be free to think and free to do things their own way. So I'm also going to read to you what someone suggested in the comments. Someone named Edgar A. Guest. I explained this guy to you last time. He lived in the 1940s, and he worked for a newspaper, which Amy in Idaho sent me a book about him. It was really interesting. He wrote for this newspaper. He didn't write for the newspaper originally. He was in charge of the human interest column, and he would go around finding recipes and poems and human interest stories to put in there. But when he couldn't find anything, he would just write his own poem. Well, eventually he just started his own. He just put his poems in there, and this one was called "It Couldn't Be Done." I love this poem because I can look back in the olden days when I was 16 to when I first heard the words, "Well, you can't do that. Nobody does that. You'll not succeed if you try that. It won't work. You can't do that." That at 16 I could feel my blood boil, and I would say to myself, "What? What do you mean I can't do that?" And I would do it. I guess just because it was a motivation, it was a trigger. It helped me to do it. And nowadays, if somebody says something that triggers you, people will go into a rage or a meltdown instead. But in those days, in the olden times, we used to use it as a trigger to do better and to go forward instead. And I remember when my parents and their friends all went to Homestead in Alaska, and they were all very young, some of them still teenagers, and they went and they got some land and they built houses on this land, and people that were in the South 48 were saying, "I don't know if you can do that. I don't know if you should do that. I don't think you should." And they were constantly giving them bad advice. In fact, people would come out to see these homesteaders, including my parents, and try to talk them out of living out there because it was far away, it was lonely, it was isolated, didn't have all the modern conveniences. But my parents were stubborn, and a lot of other people were stubborn, and they said, well, as quick as they could, they got it, they modernized it. We had running water, we had electricity, we had a telephone, we had a road, and they did that with just in a few years. But I remember the naysayers coming out. I was old enough to remember them coming out and saying, "You'll never do that, you'll never succeed, that's not good for the kids, you shouldn't be out here." So this Edgar A. Guest, he was from the olden days. I want to read this. Somebody said that it couldn't be done, but he, with a chuckle, replied that maybe it couldn't, but he would be one who wouldn't say so till he tried. So he buckled right in with a trace of a grin on his face. If he worried, he hid it. He started to sing as he tackled the thing that couldn't be done, and he did it. Somebody scoffed, "Oh, you'll never do that. At least no one ever has done it." But he took off his coat and he took off his hat, and the first thing he knew, he'd begun it. With a lift of his chin and a bit of a grin, without any doubting or quit it, he started to sing as he tackled the thing that couldn't be done, and he did it. There are thousands to tell you it cannot be done. There are thousands to prophesy failure. There are thousands to point out to you one by one the dangers that wait to assail you. But just buckle in with a bit of a grin and take off your coat and go to it. Just start in to sing as you tackle the thing that cannot be done, and you'll do it. Now here's another one that was written by John Greenleaf Whittier. He was more of a colloquial type of guy that was kind of wrote in a country fashion, and he was American. And he wrote a lot of the poems that were included in some of the old readers for children in the 1800s. So I don't know I think this is called "Don't Quit." When things go wrong, as they sometimes will, when the road you're trudging seems all uphill, when the funds are low and the debts are high, and you want to smile but you have to sigh, when care is pressing you down a bit, rest if you must, but don't you quit. Life is queer with its twists and turns, as every one of us sometimes learns, and many a fellow turns about when he might have won had he stuck it out. Don't give up though the pace seems slow, you may succeed with another blow. Often the goal is nearer than it seems to a faint and faltering man. Often the struggler has given up when he might have captured the victor's cup. And he learned too late when the night came down how close he was to the golden crown. Success is failure turned inside out, the silver tint in the clouds of doubt. And you never can tell how close you are. It might be near when it seems afar. So stick to the fight when your heart is hit. It's when things seem worse that you must not quit. Isn't that interesting? Now, I told you before, there's another saying, it's always darkest before the dawn. Around 4 o'clock in the afternoon, when you look around and see that you haven't quite done what you wanted to or achieved your goals, it's easy to feel depressed. But it's always darkest before the dawn. The next morning when you get up, the problems don't seem as things weigh heavily on you towards the end of the day. The problems don't, they're lighter when you wake up in the morning. And we were talking in our ladies' Bible class about something very interesting, talking about figures of speech and the use of words in the Bible. How many times the word walk, sit, and run, walk, sit, and run are used to apply to something spiritually. Like the Apostle Paul said, you were running well. Who persuaded you to stop? Who persuaded you to go backwards? You were running well. Blessed is the man that walketh not, he walks not in the counsel of the ungodly, using the word walk. I'm just trying to show you these, how these words are used as comparisons. Nor sitteth in the seat of the sinner, sitting, nor standeth in the way of the ungodly. So walk, sit, stand, and run, all pertaining to going somewhere, going or stopping. And it's just interesting how to use that word walk, and like walk uprightly. And it's not the literal walking, but in the home, you can use those two things. You can use those words where you use the idea of walking and sitting and standing also in a spiritual way. I think that's really important too. You could do a study on that for yourself. So there are many other things that I'd like to talk to you about, and one of them is someone suggested that I talk a little bit about dealing with argumentative people when everybody else in the home is negative and you're not, and you don't want to deal with that. That is hard, especially if they're all adults. And that is very difficult. And people have said you're going to have to get away from those, far away from those people as you can. But sometimes it's unavoidable because they are in your house and you're eating together and you're living together, and sometimes that's very hard. Now, one of the reasons people get so negative is from what they are listening to themselves. They might be absorbing a lot of the news media, a lot of television, and even some of the more conservative sites can get pretty depressing. There are some people that like to predict doom, just like that man said, there are plenty to prophesy failure. And so even the most conservative people that claims to be pro-family aren't pro-family if they're predicting failure all the time. If they're, one of the things that I don't like, and I will get to how to handle these people, I think it depends on you and your family too, and your personality, on what you're willing to do, because you know them better than I do. But one of the things that I don't like is to hear someone say, maybe a young person has gone to an older person and said, what can I do about this situation? And instead of telling them, giving them some ideas, how they can move forward, how they could change things, how they could work around something, how they could repair something, this person will say, well, we're all fallen. Look, that doesn't get anywhere. I don't see any example of that in the New Testament. Every time someone in the New Testament or Old Testament was in a problem or complaining, the Lord said, get up and go here, get up and do this, and go therefore and say this. And so you have to get up and you have to go do something. You have to solve the problem. But just standing around saying, well, it's a fallen world, is not going to help you move forward. And I don't see that answer being given by the Apostle Paul, by Christ, or anything like that. Jesus would often say, go, go do this. And God would often say, go into the city and it will be told you what you must do. And look up that word do if you can, in the New Testament especially, because you will see that word do is in there. See if that makes a difference. Now, dealing with these people that want to argue all the time or be negative all the time, because they're not in their right mind, you cannot try not to reason with people who are not reasonable. They may not be reasonable. They may want, you just may be giving them fuel if you try to reason with them. So you might want to leave them alone. Definitely don't quote scripture to them if you're just casting your pearls before swine, or if they're going to argue with it. You don't want to do that. So what I would suggest, and this is what I do, and every one of you has your own, you know the personality of your family. I don't. But I know how to get maybe a distant relative that comes in once in a while that's just gloomy and morose all the time. I will get a pattern out or a recipe out, and I will say, you know, I'm having trouble with this collar. Do you see the directions? It missed a spot. It doesn't explain what to do after this. You are very good at predictions and logistics and puzzles, and can you figure out what to do with that? And they'll look at this, and it distracts them. And then, of course, they always put me down as that it's just the rantings of an old woman from the olden days. And that doesn't bother me a bit. It kind of amuses me. But it distracts them, and it cuts down on some of that arguing. And the other thing, because they can't sit there and argue with that. And the other thing is, I get out a recipe, and I'll say, you know, I tried this recipe, and it says you have to put so much paprika in it, but I can't see any difference. I can't taste it, and I've left out the paprika, and it doesn't do this, and they'll look at that, and they give me a blank stare, because basically these people are doing nothing. So they cannot solve problems. And it's useless to try to argue with them, or to try to correct their negativity. They have to do that themselves, but you don't have to participate in them. You can change the subject, and then you can get very busy. And I remember my mother, this is where I got this from. And in the future videos, you might see me doing something like sorting through a box of papers, or ironing, or stacking something, or sorting something while I'm talking to you, because I don't like to sit still for very long. And what my mother used to do is you'd get a nosy neighbor or somebody that was a little idle that wanted to come around and criticize or waste your time. And my mother would say, you know, I've got work to do. If you want to follow me around while I do my work, I'll listen to you, but I can't sit here. Some people want you just to sit still and look at them, and you can waste hours of time. Now, my mother had 7 children. She could not sit like a queen in a chair and just have all her subjects come to her and tell them what they needed or what they were thinking, because she had work to do. So she would put us all to work. That's another thing. A negative person needs to be put to work. They need to have something to do. So what I do is hand them something and say, could you please, like a light bulb, could you please put this light bulb in for me? And you know they'll obey me. They'll go straight over there, get on a chair, and put the light bulb in. And the arguing negative people need work to do. So what you want to say is, that hinge on that door over there is really squeaky. Could you fix that for me? I'm just clueless as to how to do that. Or I need this done or that done. Could you do that for me today? And then that distracts them from their negative thinking and their arguing. But one of the things my mother used to do is have people follow her around in the garden, and she would take care of her strawberry plants, and she grew the best strawberries in the world. But you had to follow her around if you were going to talk to her, or you wanted her to talk to you, because she could not afford the time to just sit and address your negativity or your arguing. She said, you'll have to follow me around. And then she would give people jobs to do. And so when someone's trying to be argumentative, you hand them something and say, could you dry these dishes for me? Or you could say something like, would you mind carrying that basket of wet laundry to the line for me? And you just listen to them, but you distract them with these things. Now, you know your family better than I do, so don't take my words as gospel. You have to figure it out for yourself. Now, if you have anything else you'd like me to talk about, today or tomorrow. I'm planning on broadcasting throughout the weekend, and of course we'll get a new refurbished computer soon, and probably do better. And one thing you can do with people who are negative or critical is they'll go on and on about how. I remember one time I was visiting someone in another country, and they were going on and on about, you Americans, you do this and you do that, and I don't like this, and how come you always refer to, because we always say, let's go junking, and let's go get some junk, or we like to go to the used stores and the antique stores and thrift stores and buy things that you can fix up, or you can paint, or you can bring back, or that's a little antique, a little treasure, don't cost very much at all, probably just pennies, and sometimes they have a free box in front of their store, and we'll say, let's go junking. And I was showing this person in this other country that we were visiting pictures of this junk that we had bought and how we had used it in our home, and it looked good as new and everything. He said, well, you Americans, one thing that irritates me about you is you call this stuff junk. We don't call it junk. And I forget what it was they called it. I rediscovered something or other, but so I was listening to this person go on, and then another expression you have that I don't like is this and this. And by the time he had finished, I discovered, it wasn't going to be any use to defend myself. So I said, you may be right about that. We will just have to do better. And where I got that from was in Wives and Daughters, when the woman that was so disappointed that the Duchess came to the party without her jewels and without her coronet and without looking like a duchess, and she said, this is a sorry excuse for a duchess, and Lady Harriet said, you're quite right, we'll have to do better. So that's one way that you can stop the critics and the naysayers in their tracks, is say, you're quite right, we will just have to do better. Give them a big smile. And I know you'll shed many tears over the negativism that is going on today, but you can often, if you will think of your house as a country, you can establish in your constitution that there will be no complaining, condemning, or criticizing, and remind people that they have to give a solution. One of the things you can do to a negative person is to ask, what would you do? Give me a solution. Tell me how to fix it. Well, how would you fix that? And most of the time they don't have much of a solution, but might get them thinking. Make me a list of things that I can do that would help, that would do better. How can I help you? How can I fix it? So you've got to be very careful with these people. Some of them just want to demoralize other people on purpose to make them fail. So there will always be that, have always been that from the beginning of time. So don't let it discourage you. And remember the words of those poems that I just read. And I will publish them on my blog along with Home on the Range and maybe a hymn. So thank you for watching. I've only gone 43 minutes. I realize that. And I don't think I'm going to be able to go an hour with this today. So remember, dress up, look up, and live it up. Thank you and goodbye.